October 6th, 2020. Sometime during the night, a thief enters the garage of an East Naples apartment complex, and while the owner is sleeping, steals a silver Lexus GX 470. 3 days later, the Lexus is found abandoned in Immokalee, the small community in rural Collier County, more than 40 miles away. Over the following months, the Collier County Sheriff's Office sees this pattern repeated several times. A vehicle is stolen in Naples, then turns up in Immokalee a few days later.
During a time span of 7-8 months, we had a series, an uptick, if you will, of grand theft autos.
Sergeant Gus Santos is in charge of the Collier County Sheriff's Office Grand Theft Auto Division. In many of these types of crimes, there's little evidence at the original scene. When that Lexus was stolen in October of 2020, there were no fingerprints on the victim's garage and no surveillance footage available. However, once the stolen car was recovered, the hard work of CCSO crime scene investigators uncovered new evidence unseen by the naked eye, and that led to an arrest in not only this case, but 6 separate grand theft autos.
Every time we recovered a vehicle, CSI would respond to that scene, and like they always do, fantastic job in documenting the scene, photographing the evidence, collecting the evidence, collecting latent prints, and obviously touch DNA.
Touch DNA. It's the evidence we leave behind almost everywhere we go, no matter how careful we are. At the direction of Sheriff Kevin Rambosk, the Collier County Sheriff's Office is strengthening its efforts to find and process that evidence. And it's leading to more arrests and the crimes that affect the citizens of Collier County the most. This is Sworn Statement, a podcast by the Collier County Sheriff's Office, where we explore public safety issues unfolding here in Southwest Florida. I'm your host, Adam Fisher. In this episode, we're examining how the Sheriff's Office is using Touch DNA to solve these cases through a program known as our Property Crimes Initiative. Using DNA evidence to solve crimes isn't new. Law enforcement agencies, including the Collier County Sheriff's Office, have been doing it for decades. CCSO submits its DNA evidence to be analyzed by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, or FDLE, for all its major crimes. But the FDLE lab has stringent criteria for what DNA samples can be submitted, and not all DNA evidence is eligible. FDLE submissions require a second sample with the DNA of a known individual for direct comparison, and samples that contain more than one person's DNA are not eligible. Touch DNA from crimes like thefts and burglaries don't meet either qualification. Since the suspect of a crime is unknown, there is no DNA sample for comparison, and any sample taken from a theft is likely to have the DNA of multiple people, both the owner of that property as well as the suspect. As a result, CCSO had an accumulation of evidence available to be tested, but nowhere to do it. That's why we've created our Property Crimes Initiative. Jessica Gerster, lab supervisor for our Forensics Bureau, explains more.
The Property Crimes Initiative is a program that we created to make sure that we are submitting touch DNA evidence from our property crimes, which affect the majority of the citizens of Collier County, that have never before been analyzed. So we're getting those samples analyzed now.
They're getting analyzed with the help of DNA Labs International, a private company out of Deerfield Beach, Florida. In April of 2021, the Collier County Sheriff's Office started submitting DNA evidence to this lab. These samples come from what are known as property crimes. Those are crimes usually involving private property that include burglary, theft, vandalism, and shoplifting, among others. These are crimes where suspects come into contact with objects, which results and clues for our investigators. As CCSO lab analyst and DNA expert Holly Cherian says, we're always leaving parts of ourselves behind, and criminals are no exception. That's the principle behind Touch DNA.
So humans shed about 30,000 to 40,000 skin cells a day. So whenever you're touching an item or passing by and sitting on something, you're actually leaving skin cells behind. As long as there's enough contact or prolonged enough contact, people are shedding skin cells. When they say, for example, touch a table or a doorknob, they are shedding skin cells on those items. So then we're able to detect those skin cells, hopefully.
Those skin cells are collected by our crime scene investigators and sent to DNA Labs International, which analyzes the DNA and tries to identify who it belongs to. If the sample matches someone whose DNA the lab already has, we have a suspect. If not, the information is saved to compare to Touch DNA samples we may collect from crimes in the future. When CCSO started its partnership with DNA Labs in April of 2021, we had more than 6,000 samples of Touch DNA. These are samples that were ineligible to be processed by the FDLE labs. Through our new partnership in this property crimes initiative, that evidence is finally being processed.
We had this evidence that was just sitting there, and this is the majority of our offenders are coming from these types of crimes affecting our citizens. So allowing us to process these items are allowing us to connect our offenders to crimes that are taking place and affecting our citizens in a more accurate way of dealing with the crime locally.
The Collier County Sheriff's Office has now received results for more than 600 items of Touch DNA evidence submitted to DNA Labs International, while the rest of our samples are still being processed. Those samples have led to more than 200 unique DNA profiles being submitted to DNA Labs to help solve crimes in the future. All this work has led to 36 verified DNA matches where investigators have been able to link suspects to crimes. These are suspects we wouldn't have been able to identify before without our property crimes initiative.
And now the neat part of it is we're really seeing the results come out.
That's our DNA expert again, Holly Cherian.
We've had the program going on for a while now, and we're seeing the results, which is phenomenal because now Chain of Command is able to see, oh, okay, what we're doing is actually making a difference in our community, which is wonderful.
Once the Sheriff's Office began submitting DNA samples to DNA Labs International, it took a while to start processing them. It can take weeks, even months, to analyze individual DNA. But when the results started coming in, our partnership with the lab paid off almost immediately. And that brings us back to Sergeant Santos and the rise in grand theft autos that began in late 2020.
What happened during that time span, and when those vehicles were being stolen, every time CSI would respond and collect that evidence, they would send that evidence up. And lo and behold, fast forward 4 to 5 months, we started getting those results. And then those results revealed that Charlie Prey was a match for that DNA collected in 4 of those cases.
Charlie Prey. The name was well known to CCSO detectives. On May 11, 2021, Prey, then a 19-year-old man from Immokalee, was arrested for a grand theft auto that occurred in February of 2021. It wasn't DNA that connected Prey to that case. Prey was caught on a security camera driving the stolen car in question. However, once Prey was in custody, CCSO was able to obtain his DNA. When the first results from DNA Labs International started coming back, the name Charlie Prey popped up over and over again. In the following weeks, as the DNA evidence continued to come in, CCSO was able to connect Prey to 4 more GTAs based on the DNA evidence. That includes the October 2020 theft of a Lexus we mentioned at the top of this episode, which kicked off this crime spree. Prey also was identified in a fifth grand theft auto through fingerprints, and those results were confirmed with DNA. He was arrested and charged in all 6 cases. Charlie Prey now sits in the Naples Jail Center facing 14 felony charges in connection to these crimes.
Not too far distant, the property crimes didn't have this avenue to have the DNA explored and processed and evaluated and analyzed. Now we do, and that's helping us identify some of these offenders to the point where it's assisting us with state attorney's office and prosecuting a lot of these cases.
Our partnership with DNA Labs International isn't just helping us put criminals away. The DNA that's being analyzed is connecting law enforcement agencies around the state by connecting offenders to cases that might have occurred out of their jurisdiction. For example, the Collier County Sheriff's Office connected offenders to 2 grand theft auto cases thanks to DNA evidence submitted by the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office. Those cases went unsolved for more than 3 years when DNA Labs was able to match DNA from the crimes in Collier County to one of the known offenders from Sarasota. Our partnership with DNA Labs has also led to a renewed emphasis on DNA collection at the Sheriff's Office. Using expert techniques, our crime scene investigators are not only getting more samples, they're getting better samples of DNA to submit for analysis. That leads to better results.
We have seen an influx in just the quality of results that we've obtained now, which has been great because we're getting more people behind bars that need to be behind bars that are committing the crimes locally. And if we can get them earlier on, then most of the time we're preventing future crimes that may be more serious later. So if we can get them at the front end of the more petty crimes, such as burglaries, then we can probably prevent more of the serious crimes later if we can just get them behind bars where they need to be.
Before joining the Sheriff's Office in 2019, Holly Cherian was a DNA analyst in Texas, working in a lab and performing the type of test that DNA Labs International now performs on our evidence. Under our new initiative, CCSO investigators are using improved techniques and practices to obtain those lab-quality DNA samples, which are more easily analyzed.
I was working in a laboratory and actually doing more of the scientific analysis of it. So now I work for Collier County. I was able to utilize those techniques that we learned in the laboratory and what we're looking for from a laboratory standpoint and bring those techniques over to the crime scene side of things. So it's actually helped us in a lot of the way we collect evidence, because now we're obtaining better results because we're utilizing specific techniques that even the laboratory utilizes in-house.
Better samples, increased testing, and more criminals behind bars. As Sergeant Santos tells us, the end result of our property crimes initiative is that Collier County is becoming an even safer place to live by taking people like Charlie Prey off the street.
Especially someone like that victimizing and preying on the citizens of Collier and the residents here. When we take someone like that off the streets, that's definitely something big for us. On a lot of these cases where in years past, we had no idea who these individuals were. But it would have definitely been a lot harder to actually solve some of these without the DNA, of course.
Solving cases is the ultimate reward, especially for the crime scene investigators and lab analysts who go to great lengths and often work through strenuous conditions to acquire these DNA samples.
It does. It makes me feel great.
That's Jessica Gerster, our lab service supervisor.
I think it's a benefit to our CSIs who are spending so many hours out there collecting this evidence, processing this evidence, working in conditions that are not ideal most of the time, heat, especially with 104 heat indexes when you're standing outside for 2 hours processing a vehicle. To get this DNA and to see there be solutions to it is significant.
And the results could be even more significant in the future. Holly Cherian is excited to see how our use of DNA expands, which includes solving new cases and old ones.
What's neat about that is the technology may not have been present 10, 15 years ago. So now we have the newer technologies. We're able to revisit those cases, bring out the evidence, and then resubmit it for analysis. So the only way to do that is for us to stay on top of what the newer technologies are and then being able to solve those cases, which we've also had success with here at CCSO, which has been truly amazing. For me as a DNA analyst, it is the most rewarding part of my work. It's not just bringing in knowing the new technologies and the latest, coolest thing, but it's also being able to see the results and being able to solve cases. It's pretty neat. It's very rewarding. That's why I do what I do.
Jessica Gerster feels that same sense of pride.
I'm very passionate about it. This was a situation that as a CSI and then moving up to a supervisor in crime scene, that I had seen a trend of where we were leaving something missing. And to have the ability and to have the support of the chain of command to follow through with this and to create this initiative, I'm just very proud of it because I see the results we're getting and I know that's only going to continue as we move forward.
Sworn Statement is a production of the Collier County Sheriff's Office under the direction of Sheriff Kevin Rambosk. This episode was written and produced by me, Adam Fisher, with audio recording and editing by Brian Barcelo. Thanks for listening.